Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I am one of the ministers here. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, along with the worship team of Linda Warren, Drew Collins, Daniel Carnes, and Stephen Gregorius. It is a wonderful morning to greet you and to have you here. We have great excitement that our choirs have returned, and getting to hear them at 9 a.m. was an incredible blessing, and so I'm glad we get to hear them again. We're very grateful for all of you. The vision of First Unitarian Society is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our Unitarian Universalist values in our lives, in our community, and in our world. If you are visiting us today, welcome. We are so very glad that you are with us. If you would like more information about First Unitarian Society, our programs and activities, you can stop by the welcome table out in the Commons. It's almost directly across from these doors. One special announcement is that you may have seen out on the front lawn the peace poles. Those go up every year on Mother's Day weekend, and so people have been decorating yesterday and today. Kelly will be leading a blessing of the peace poles immediately after service. So if you would like to be there for that, you can join Kelly and others out on the lawn over in front of those landmark doors. And for those of you connecting with us virtually today, we are so very glad that you are with us as well. And we hope you'll be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour immediately following service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, as well as on the slide that will be seen again after the postlude. Our announcement slides will also be seen again after the postlude, so I encourage you to take a moment and watch those and learn more about what's happening here at First Unitarian Society. And now I invite you to join me in a moment of silence as we center ourselves, bringing ourselves fully into this time, joining together once again in community. Welcome, who come in friendship, who long for genuine community.
May you be graciously received here as your authentic self.
Welcome, who come in curiosity, full of questions, or simply open.
May you embrace wonder and encounter new delights.
Welcome, who come heavy with fatigue, weary from the troubles of the world or the troubles of your particular life.
May you rest and be filled in this sacred space.
Welcome, who come with joy for flowing rivers, gentle breezes, for changing skies and the great trees.
May the grace of the world leave a lasting imprint in you.
Welcome, who come with thanks for the altruism of the earth and the gift of human care.
May your grateful heart overflow and bless those around you.
Come, let us celebrate together this wondrous life. And I invite you now to rise in all the ways we do and join together in our words of affirmation as we light our chalice. In this small flame dwell, the beacon light of lanterns guiding travelers home, the warmth of hearth fires tended through the generations, the transforming energy of furnaces, and the power and life of our sun. May these blessings, warmth and light and life-giving energy, be kindled in each of us.
Rise up, O flame, by thy light glowing.
The story I would like to tell you today is about a Zen Buddhist monk who lived a few hundred years ago in Japan. Now, he was a monk, which means that he had devoted his life to the practice of his religion, but he was also a very talented painter. It's actually one of his paintings on the screen here. And he was so talented and so gifted, and he worked hard at his craft, that lots of different people wanted one of his paintings. And he would paint them for them, paint you whatever you asked. But he always made sure that you paid the most money he would possibly get out of you for that painting. He had this gift. He could look at somebody and he could figure out exactly how much they would pay for his painting. Not so much that they'd say, okay, fine, I don't need the painting, right? He would just find exactly that right number that they would pay it, but they'd feel it. Now, some folks thought less of him because he charged money for the paintings that he made. After all, he's a monk. Not supposed to be focused on money. In fact, there was one very wealthy person who hired him to paint a painting, and he was painting the picture, and the wealthy person said, "Would you paint me another picture?" He said, "Sure, yeah, of course, all right, same price, but sure." All right. So when the monk had finished that first painting, he said, "All right, so what do you want me to paint for your next painting?" He said, "Well, I want you to paint me from behind." Sort of a cheeky request to make. But he painted that picture. He got his money. Now, you might be asking, what's the deal with this monk who's so focused on getting paid for all of his work? I mean, monks are supposed to promise not to have a lot of things. So what's he doing with all this money? Well, here is the story behind the story. You see, that monk, he built a bridge over a very dangerous river near where he grew up. He built a temple in a city where he used to live. He established a fund for poor folks to be given support in time of drought or famine. Basically, he needed all that money that he earned from that painting because he wanted to give it away.
And I invite you now into this time of giving and receiving, where we give freely and generously to our offering, sustaining our community here, as well as supporting the work of our outreach offering recipient. And this week's offering will be shared with 350 Madison. Started by Madison area climate activists in January of 2012, 350 Madison plans and participates in local, national, and international actions to raise awareness of the pressing need to address climate change. Many FUS members are leaders within 350 Madison, and our congregation collaborates a great deal with them on climate justice actions. So you'll see on the screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You'll see our text to give information there as well. There are also baskets here at the exits of the auditorium. We thank you for your generosity and for your faith in this life we create together.
Amen.
this is not going to be exactly the reflection that I originally envisioned for today. Now, I could actually say that almost every week, but this time it feels like it needs to be said. Our theme for this month is nurturing beauty, and so I thought we should spend some time with a few beautiful works of art. We're still going to do that, though some of the works that I have chosen have changed. Because this week, we got the news that a partisan majority of Supreme Court justices are almost certainly going to overturn the 50 years of precedent that protects the bodily autonomy of anyone in this country who can become pregnant. Because of this, the context in which we will view this art together has necessarily changed. But one of the hallmarks of art, or at least of all art that is worth keeping around, is that it speaks to each new moment that we encounter it in as much or more than to the moment at which it was first created by the artist. This particular moment is a crescendo in the slow-moving assault on the human rights and fundamental dignity of all women, as well as of those trans and non-binary folks who can now or might one day or ever could have become pregnant. And its collision with the weekend of Mother's Day may feel sour. The moms in the room deserve to be celebrated. And that deserved celebration illustrates why the cause of reproductive freedom has, for so long, been a fundamental theological issue for us as Unitarian Universalists. The free right to choose is what makes possible the sanctity of that which we choose. And the true freedom to accept a blessing also requires the unfettered right to decline it. For this reason, our theological ancestors, and some of us perhaps within the sound of my voice, struggled hard to win and to keep rights now being stolen again. There is so much to grieve in this, so much righteous indignation to pour out onto the streets and into the halls of power. I ask you to postpone none of it. And one of the ways we sustain the energy that we have for the work that must be done is by experiencing, contemplating, and cultivating meaning from beautiful things. So, aware now of some of the shared context of how we will enter into it, I will invite you to imagine yourself into a gallery of the mind with me. As someone who has spent a good bit of time in art galleries over my life, sometimes enthusiastically, sometimes not, I recognize that this might be easier for some of us than others. So know then, that the standard decor for an art gallery is just blank white walls to better contrast the artwork with. With that information, picturing one should be relatively accessible. Let us then begin our tour. This is the Venus of Willendorf. It is a small stone figure about 4.5 inches tall and depicts the naked body of a woman with particularly full hips, waist, thighs, belly, and breasts. We do not know who made it or why, beyond guesses we might make from the object itself. It is not signed. There is no chain of custody. It was found during an archaeological dig near the town of Willendorf in Austria. Based on the layers of sediments that surrounded it, the estimate is that this piece of art was made somewhere between 25 and 30,000 years ago. It is most commonly called the Venus of Willendorf on the assumption that it is a religious object and represents some sort of a divine being, and that, Based on its appearance, this divine being must be some sort of fertility figure or mother goddess. Of course, that's just a shorthand for a religious system that we can only guess at the existence of. This piece is older than the name Venus, a Roman deity, by potentially as much as 24 millennia. It is older than any of the earlier documented goddesses that Venus is thought to be descended from as a religious idea. It is older than writing, older than agriculture, older than metallurgy. This object is a reminder, and not even the oldest one by far, that human beings have been making art, whatever varied reasons we might have for doing that, since long, long before nearly every other marker of shared culture amongst groups of people. It is not unique. A number of other figures alike to it in style and age have been found all over Europe and as far east as Siberia in northern Asia. If its original meaning is impossible to know with certainty, it seems that whatever that meaning was shared by many people over a vast area. In a place and at a time when just surviving must have been spectacularly hard, someone or someones devoted the time and attention to making this, to forming the lines of the knees and the intricate details of the hair. There is a scholarly line of argument that asserts this is not the image of a goddess at all, rather that the proportions of the sculpture can be explained by the artist. A woman, and perhaps specifically a pregnant woman, looking down at her own body. Some details would be necessarily magnified simply by perspective. This is also meant to explain why the figure has a completely blank face. And here it ought to be observed that most of the scholarship about this work can be faithfully described as men advancing their theories and arguments about the meaning and purpose of a woman's body. So if two competing theories about this piece of art are that it represents a goddess or that it is a woman's self-portrait, that seems to me to beg the question, why can't it be both? This next piece, I think, addresses the same question. Why can't it be both, just from a different direction? This is Los Dos Fridas, the two Fridas, by the Mexican painter Frida Kahlo. It's a self-portrait, again, depicting the two sides of herself. On one side, the artist appears in formal European-style dress. On the other, a more casual and traditionally Mexican style. Storms rage in the background. Frida painted this in the tempestuous period just before her divorce. Both Fridas have their hearts laid bare, but it's the proper, formal Frida whose heart is visibly broken. She has bled onto her white dress, but stopped the flow from the artery with a medical clamp in one hand. Yet she is companioned by the native Frida, with her exposed but unbroken heart. They are connected by a shared vein. They sit together, holding hands. There's much to explore in the imagery here. Frida rejected the label surrealist for herself, insisting that she always depicted the same singular reality, her own. But one of the things I see in this painting is an expression of a common, perhaps universal predicament, of being forced to choose between seemingly different facets of one's own identity. The cultural messages, social expectations, and sometimes outright violent force, which insists that a person can only be this or that, falls hard in the places where we know ourselves to be both. or neither for that matter. Here, Frida confronts that forced duality by depicting two different facets of herself supporting and caring for each other. She can be both Fridas. She is both Fridas. And she is stronger for it. Now, most of you have probably seen this next piece on our tour before, or rather something very much like this next piece. This is Study for Warhol's Marilyn by Elaine Sturtevant. Andy Warhol was among the most famous and recognizable artists of the latter half of the 20th century, and his various renditions of a particular image of Marilyn Monroe's incredibly famous face are among his most recognizable works. Elaine Sturtevant devoted her entire decades-long artistic career to painstakingly imitating the work of other artists in order to express her own challenging ideas about originality, credit, and authenticity, or the lack thereof. She mirrored the work of dozens of artists in many different styles and media, meaning that she had to develop master-level talent in painting, sculpting, and photography, among other disciplines. But perhaps no single artist was better suited to being copied by Elaine Sturtevant than Andy Warhol. Many of Warhol's most famous images were silk-screened, a printing process which he used to transfer and modify photo images onto canvas. He did not do this himself. He had a number of workers who did it for him. He was basically an idea person, and with most or all of the physical craft of his work being done by others. Warhol appreciated what Sturtevant was trying to say with her own artwork, and he gave her access to his workshop and employees. Several of her Warhol copies were made on the same silkscreen system that had produced his originals. Reportedly, when he was asked by an interviewer to explain that process, he just said, "Ask Elaine," a seeming acknowledgement that she understood how the work he was known for had been made on a deeper level than he did. The Marilyn, though, that was more of a challenge. By the time Elaine set out to copy this one, the silkscreen material for it had already been destroyed. Instead, she had to track down the original negative of the photograph that Warhol had used as the basis for his piece. She then used it to make her own silkscreen and used that to make her own image. Which raises some uncomfortable questions, like which parts of the artistic process matter for crediting an artist and which do not? Warhol himself did not print the image, did not make the silkscreen used to print the image, did not take the photograph on which the silkscreen was based, and it's not his face. But it is his name on the canvas, his accolades, his fame, and all that lovely money went to him when the painting was sold. Elaine Sturtevant's copy, on the other hand, had her as sole author from the rediscovery of the negative to the finished product. On a weekend when we are called to think about motherhood and all that it entails, it seems to me there's a lot there to reflect on about whether what matters most is the abstract idea of a thing, a piece of art, a child, the concept of motherhood itself, or who puts in the work, and by toil and sweat turns an idea into a lived reality. The next piece I'd like us to consider together is Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party. There's a picture of it on the screen, but it is such a vast and intricate work that it's difficult to represent with one or even several photographs. The piece fills an entire very large room. It is a triangular table set with 13 unique place settings on each side. Each of these 39 stations, lit from above so that they appear like altars, is designed and designated for a specific woman from history. There are figures of religion, such as the goddesses Ishtar and Kali, the biblical Judith, Saints Marcella and Bridget, but most are concretely historical figures, such as the poet Sappho, the Byzantine Empress Theodora, Anne Hutchinson, who campaigned for religious freedom in colonial New England, indigenous explorer and translator Sacagawea, and abolitionist and women's rights activist Sojourner Truth. Inscribed into the floor underneath the table are 999 more names of people identified as foremothers in the long, slow, still incomplete course towards an egalitarian world. As should not be surprising for a work on this scale, it took several years to complete. More than 400 people, most of them volunteers, contributed labor to the project. If I sounded critical before of Warhol's method of coming up with a concept and farming out execution to others, please don't think the same about Judy Chicago. She was the driving force throughout, not just in dreaming the idea, but in actually making it a physical reality. And a list of more than 100 other people are credited by name as members of the project for their deep, ongoing work in support of it. The piece is an overt effort to reclaim a place at the table for women of power and measurable historical impact by literally building a new table. And as in all things, the greater and more grandiose the undertaking, the more potential criticisms arise to it. Anyone could interrogate the choices for the 39 seats at the dinner table, and many have. Reportedly, due to a historical misunderstanding, one of the 999 names on the floor actually belongs to a man. But I would argue that a beautiful thing does not need to be singularly perfect in order to be meaningful or important. The dinner party came out of the revolutionary strain of American feminism in the 1970s. It was meant to address a lack of self-knowledge by women and knowledge of women by men and others. Even at their most grandiose, Judy Chicago and the other contributors never claimed that by itself the installation would complete the work of building a fully egalitarian society. It is instead a signpost, marking out some of the next steps toward that noble goal. Now, this next image is a particular rendition of one of the most frequently portrayed figures in the history of human artwork. This is the Holy Virgin Mary by English artist Chris O'Feely, the first black artist to win the United Kingdom's Turner Prize. It depicts Mary, the mother of Jesus, as a black woman in a style and using methods influenced by the time that O'Feely spent living in Zimbabwe. Much of the symbolism in this painting is highly traditional. Mary's blue robe, or the way in which her head is covered, or the fact that she's attended by butterflies. However, upon close inspection, the viewer can see that the butterflies are made out of photographs cut out from pornographic magazines. And most significantly for the painter's detractors, the work incorporates elephant dung along with paper and paint. If you've heard of this work before, it's almost certainly due to the controversy that surrounded its American debut. The then mayor of New York threatened to defund the museum at which it was displayed, and it was successfully attacked with white paint by one critic and with horse manure by another, on the grounds that the work was anti-Catholic. Chris O'Feely, the artist, was raised Roman Catholic, and for his part has noted that in some schools of African traditional art, elephant dung is a completely normal and accepted artistic material. The piece raises challenges to a still largely Christian society which venerates some women's bodies, or at least one woman's body, while objectifying and commodifying and policing others. It mingles earthy, supposedly profane materials with the image of a figure whose sacred identity is bound up with gestational motherhood and birth, a role which is fundamentally of the body and its natural processes, and can only be sanitized through abstraction and the total loss of what it means practically to bring life into the world through one's own labor. And let us not ignore, it depicts Mary as a black woman, challenging centuries' worth of depictions of her and her son. But the rage-filled, vengeful, and at times violent protests and criticisms of the work are perhaps its strongest messages. If it was a provocation, the response to it says much about religious chauvinism, acceptable and unacceptable racial categories, and even how the boundaries of femininity and masculinity must be policed for those whom it provoked. Now, for the final work of this tour, we come to a very recent piece by the American fiber artist Bisa Butler. This is Dear Mama. Of all these 6 works, I am perhaps most sad that I can't put this one in front of you up close in 3 dimensions. Because this is not a painting. This is a quilt. And all of its levels and textures are composed of many, many, many pieces of cloth carefully chosen and stitched together. It depicts a black mother and daughter, both facing forward, though in somewhat different directions. The child looks a little sullen or apprehensive. The mother may be thoughtful or resolved. It is not, I think, the most conventional sort of scene for a celebration of motherhood and gratitude for mothers, but that is what it is meant to be. Bisa Butler created this quilted image following the death of her stepmother in 2019, which is a reminder to me that there are so many different ways to be or become a mom, and all of them are worthy. Stitched into the background of this picture are lyrics from Tupac Shakur's song of the same title. Don't you know that I love you? Place no one above you. I appreciate you. I got to thank the Lord that you made me. The relationship between mother and child is not always a cheery or saccharine sweet one. And that seems to be highlighted in this image. What is going on here? Is the daughter disappointed or chastened? Has she just been told no? Or is she afraid of something in front of her and relying on her mother behind her for support? Is the mother worried, protective, fixated on some larger concern for her child's benefit that nonetheless makes the girl unhappy in the short term? All of these seem possible, and all of them are possible within the unbounded love of a parent devoted to her children. With or without a smile, a mother's love can still be fully on display. So with this imaginary tour now concluded, I want you to picture one final white wall, and I'm going to give you an inscription for it, a quote for this moment and many other moments besides, from Julian of Norwich. Julian, the great Christian woman mystic of late medieval England, wrote that these lines came to her as a divine message that she understood herself to have received. She said, "All shall be well, and all shall be well. All manner of things shall be well." Julian experienced this revelation at a time of deep political and social turmoil, as the Black Plague still echoed across Europe, living in either a newly post-apocalypse or an as-yet unfinished apocalypse, depending on how you measure things. All was most definitely not well. But she was not articulating, I do not believe, that that which is wrong is right. Rather, that that which is wrong may be changed.
Thank you. Each week we bring ourselves to this time and this place, carrying with us the concerns and the joys of recent days. We share these here in a spirit of acceptance and support, knowing they are held in love. We light a candle for Julia McPeak, who grew up here at First Unitarian Society, and she asks us to light this candle for her father, John McPeak, who passed away on Friday evening. A service is being held at Temple Beth David in Snellville, Georgia, and we send Julia and her family our love in this time of loss and mourning. We light a candle for Misty Larson, who fell at home yesterday and is living with the complications of that fall. And we send Misty our love and strength and steadiness for the days to come. We light a candle of love and support for Karen Jaeger. We mentioned last week that Karen has entered into hospice in Missoula, Montana, and many of you asked about sending cards. So we wanted to let you know that there is a box with Karen's name on it in the landmark vestibule. And if you would like to place cards there for Karen, they will all be packaged up and shipped to her in Montana. And we light a candle for Eleni Musared Varga on this Mother's Day, as Eleni asks us for this candle for herself and her husband Franz, who are beginning a journey to add another person to their family. And we hope that that happens soon. And we light a candle in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, both in their suffering and their struggle. We yearn for peace for them and for all people, and an end to all wars of conquest anywhere and everywhere on earth. And I invite you now to join me in a moment of prayer honoring this Mother's Day with words from Lisa Bovey-Kemper. In religious community, we share our joys and our triumphs, our sorrows and our broken places. In this circle of care, we make space for the complexity of life, the myriad experiences that bless and break our hearts. The truth of human experience dictates that on any given day, we each come to the table with hearts in different places. It is especially so on this day, created to honor women who nurture. In this circle of care, we honor the truth that mothering is not and never will be quantified in one single descriptor. Mothering can be elusive or infuriating, fulfilling or confusing, commonplace or triumphant. It exists in the everyday experiences of each person. There's no human being that is not connected to or disconnected from a mother. And so we honor the complexity of experience, writ large in flowered platitudes, but here in this space laid bare, honoring the truth in each of our hearts. There's room for all in this circle. If you have carried a child or children, whether or not they came to be born, we see you. If you have fervently wished to do so and circumstances of fate made it impossible, we see you. If you love children we cannot see, whether because of death or estrangement, we see you. If you never wanted to be a mother, we see you. If you are happy to mother other people's children, as an educator, an aunt, a foster parent, we see you. If your mother hurt you, physically or emotionally, we see you. If you had no mother at all, we see you. If your mother is or was your best friend, we see you. If your gender says you are not a mother and yet you take on the role of nurturer, we see you. If you wonder whether your mothering has been enough, we see you. And if yours is a different truth altogether, we honor your unspoken story. There is room for all in this circle. May it be so today and always. Blessed be, and amen.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we are. There is a Now let us sing together our closing hymn, number 319, Earthborn Children of a Star. Please rise as you are
What to do with beauty, or joy for that matter, in the midst of tragedy, of violence, of cruelty? What do we do with the living? Give each their due. Do not lose ourselves in any of it, but find ourselves anew. Where there is beauty, amplify it. Where beauty is hidden, reveal it. Where beauty is ruined, restore it. Where beauty is absent, create it. This will be our gift to our aching world. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for the postlude.
the song. So this is how I found this out. And he sang with Tom Hardy. And he wrote that at his whose name is Barry. And like when he was sharing, like he was having and so people grow up hearing that and you think of Mother Mary, but it really was his mother. and just hearing that, it was just like completely blew my mind the whole meaning of the song.
Well, I love the.
Yeah. Whereas we were enjoying it